The whole Bible is a book about Israel and God's people in that area of the world they didn't have knowledge of. South America, North America, etc. The central theme is Israel and the flight of the Jews. So, the book of Daniel was written a few 100 years before Jesus, and it gives an outline of the history of the world in the eyes of Israel, basically from the beginning to the end. So, when we get into the book we're talking about, the big picture is God dealing with the Jews, so when we read chapter 2 here in a minute, you'll have more understanding of what the verses are talking about. The Bible refers to 7 different kingdoms that has tried to destroy the nation of Israel and God's people throughout history. The first ones that tried were the Egyptians, of course. When they enslaved them for 400 years, Moses brought them out to the land. Later they were taken captive and destroyed and scattered by the Assyrians. Then the Babylonians, which is the time frame that the book of Daniel was written in, and Daniel was given dreams and visions, later in chapter 7 and 8. And at that point, he laid out 4 more mountains. In Daniel refer to the kingdoms, they're like the mountain of Babylon or Greece, etc. They're going to try to destroy Israel in the future and at the end of time. It's a miniature version, if you will, of the book of Revelation. Revelation is hidden in Daniel and Daniel is hidden in Revelation. The two can be put together side by side and follow the pattern with Zechariah and Joel and some other passages throughout the Old Testament. If you took the book of Revelation out, you could still foresee everything that's going to happen because it's all in other books. The book of Revelation is all these stories being brought together from Daniel and Zechariah and Joel and Jesus' prophecies when he was on earth, and combine them into how it ends. And John in Revelation, seeing the vision of how everything is going to end. Like Moses seeing how Adam and Eve and all the history up to him was brought about, and he wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. A lot of insight in Daniel that we need to understand so we can grasp the book of Revelation. Otherwise, a lot of things won't be understood. Things like symbols and typologies and metaphors, so keep in mind here. Mountains. There are 7 mountains/kingdoms throughout history that have tried to destroy Israel. One more coming, and it's already here, but we'll get into that later. That Daniel prescribed, and keep in mind this is hundreds of years before the Medo-Persians of Greece and Rome had ever even existed. The dream in chapter 2 was given to the king of Babylon named Nebuchadnezzar of a statue, but he couldn't remember the dream that disturbed him so much. So he brought in all the wise men and Daniel. I had a dream. I want you to tell me about the dream and its meaning. Of course, they all said, no king has ever asked a request like that before. If you don't tell me, I'm going to kill you all, because none of you are true prophets. But when Daniel heard about it, he went to the king. He said, I can tell you the dream because God in heaven gave you the dream, and only he can interpret it. So Daniel went and prayed, sought the Lord. So it looks like the king was not telling them what the dream was so that they wouldn't come up with some weird interpretation. Or it may have been that he just absolutely didn't remember, but when Daniel told him, it all came back to him. But whichever, what it was is irrelevant. So here's chapter 2 verse 31. To the end of the chapter, then I will make some points about it, and go through the interpretation of that Daniel's giving to the king. 31. Your Majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. 32. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze. 33. Its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. 34. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. 35. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. 36. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. 37. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. 38 In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. 39 After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. 40 Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything, and as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. 41 Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom, yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. 42 As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. 43 And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united, any more than iron mixes with clay. 44 In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. 45 This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true and its interpretation is trustworthy. 46 Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. 47 The king said to Daniel, Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. 48 Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. 49 Moreover, at Daniel's request the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. Daniel 2 verses 31 to 49, so there's some points that I wanted to bring out. The word kingdom, when Daniel was explaining to him that word in the original Hebrew is Numbers 44:37 in Strong's, and it means realm/region. So these other kingdoms are going to be made up from that area of Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, but it'll be in the same region and realm. If you look at the maps, the Medo-Persians that took over Babylon, then Greece, then Rome, all covered the same territory. When we see in Revelation where it says the Antichrist devil rule the whole world, it may be referring to just that area of those kingdoms that have attacked Israel before. There are some passages in Isaiah that indicate that the judgment is on the surrounding nations that have persecuted Israel, these 7 mountains. When we get into Revelation, note that the other thing that was mentioned is that they will mingle themselves, the word mingle of course. Mix, together the Hebrew word 36151, look it up, but in the original Hebrew it means Arab. I found that very intriguing because all the Arab nations around Israel are Islam and are against Israel. We'll get into that later in more detail when we get into the rest of Daniel and Revelation. Keep in mind the 7 mountains are 7 kingdoms. There is a lot in the story in chapter 2. The chapter reveals the 5 world governments. What's the objective? To expose the approximate time when the beast will appear and Jesus will return and put down all thrones and places, and his saints in charge of the kingdom. It also tells us when in general the Antichrist arrives. What area will he arrive from? Babylon, which Iraq tried to redo under Saddam. In 1991. The breast and arms represent the Medes and the Persians which took over that area. They came from Iran, Iraq area. The belly and thighs represent Greece's empire. It included Greece and part of Turkey. That area of Alexander's Great took over after that. And the legs of iron seem to represent the Roman Empire, mostly the eastern part of the Roman Empire. Again, the final one, the feet, was partly of iron and partly of clay, represents the same area as geographical location of Babylon, Iraq, Iran, and Greece, with 10 toes. Will represent later in the book of Revelation. It talks about 10 kings that will side with the Antichrist, the beast, and out of them 10 kings We'll find out later when we get into chapter 7 and 8 that 3 of the 10 kings will be done away with one little horn that rises and takes over and becomes the leader with the other 7 kingdoms. Some theologists believe that that's 10. The kingdoms are only going to come up for a short time, refer to it for 1 hour, and their only purpose is to give their allegiance to the little horn, which is the beast and the Antichrist. The kings, the nations around Israel, Jordan's area, of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Libya, stuff like that. But it's the way the original Hebrew put it. It could be just like ISIS rule a big area. Hezbollah rules a big area at one time. Houthis now are in these areas. All these kingdoms could be referring to these groups that have tried to destroy Israel, and that they all come back into existence, and that could be part of the divided kingdom. That's iron and clay that don't mix, cause they all have a little bit different ideology. Yet they have one goal in mind, and that's to destroy Israel and the Jews. Add Christians, because we are offspring of them, and support Israel, the United States. This has played out in history in the last, 80 years, and mostly in the last 30 years we've attacked and tried to destroy ISIS, and we're fighting the Houthis and these other little facets that have come about. The first Gulf War was Iraq tried to take over the area with including Babylon, and start a crusade, was trying to revise, so the United States destroyed that. All the wars in the last 46 years, I guess, have that we've been involved in the Middle East to try to prevent these groups from uniting and taking over Israel. So, God has been using the United States to combat these evil forces that are trying to destroy Israel. Is part of the lesson that we should be getting out of this chapter, showing you how the Bible predicted the end times. And it played out right in front of our faces. If God sees everything till the end, and He's written this book, the Bible, and it a history of mankind from the beginning to the end, with 100% accurate. So the study of Daniel and Revelations was important because it's tomorrow's news headline. Like it has been since the 91 Gulf War. We've been involved, one way or another, to keep all the groups in these regions from taking over Israel and drawing it, which would prevent Jesus from returning. So, we're living in biblical prophecy and times right now. We'll get into some more details in chapter 8 about the war that's going on today. But another lesson from this chapter is the king fell down and honored the God of Daniel and his 3 friends. This is God, so he in essence became a believer in Jehovah, an Israelite God, for a while. In chapter 3, he made a statue that was 60 cubic, 6 cubits wide, and at certain times of the day, there were 6 different instruments playing music. And when the music was playing, you were to fall and worship the statue. The book of Daniel is describing some details of the last 7 years of the book of Revelation time frame of human history, and it's showing that somebody, in this case Nebuchadnezzar, was on the surface, a believer, presented himself as a believer. In chapter 4, you'll see it in more detail. But he set up this golden image statue. Then you look at Revelation 13 that the beast just set up, and people are to pay allegiance to the beast, who will be given a mouth to speak by the Antichrist. Seems to indicate that it was renewed later. It says that these images would be allowed to speak and talk. The statue is a prelude or an interlude representation of what's going to happen in the Revelation time frame. And what's ironic is it was 666 is mentioned in a 60 cubic tall, 6 cubic wide, with 6 instruments. When they play, everybody falls down and worships. Well, guess what's happening today? 3 times a day. If, like even in New York City, you'll hear this music play all over the speakers of the town and in all the Islamic countries. And then all the men go to the synagogue and bow down and worship. All are facing Babylon. It's the same thing that's happened today. Even live in America right now. Whatever the other music played, and when Obama was president, he made a statement. He said, "I used to love hearing that music in the morning, and everybody worships and stuff," he said. It would just be magical. What Daniel projected, and it happened. 3,000 years ago, it's going to happen again in Revelation. The prophecies and visions give us a better understanding of the book. We'll get more details in the next video. Thank you for your attention to these matters, as you'll hear in the news.